He had walked past thousands of homeless people in his 45 years, but when Richard Caldwell saw her face that rainy Chicago evening, his world stopped. The young black woman sat hunched against the cold brick wall outside Morton's Steakhouse, her cardboard sign barely readable in the dim streetlight. "Please, just food. God bless." Her oversized donated jacket hung loose on her thin frame, and she hadn't eaten in 3 days. Richard froze mid-step, his expensive Italian shoes splashing in a puddle. His briefcase slipped from his fingers as he stared at her face. Those eyes, that gentle expression, even in desperation. "My God," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. "It's impossible!" Because what Richard remembered about this 19-year-old girl would unlock a memory buried for 11 years, a memory of the most terrifying night of his life, when a brave 8-year-old child had saved him from certain death. But first, he had to be absolutely certain this was the same girl who once changed everything. At 19, Zara Williams had already survived more than most people face in a lifetime, but she had no idea her greatest test was just beginning. Every morning started the same way. Wake up in whatever doorway or shelter bed she'd managed to claim the night before. Check that her torn backpack still held everything she owned, one change of clothes, a worn Bible, and the small wooden cross necklace that never left her throat. The cross was all she had left of her real mother. Everything else had been lost in the system. Zara had aged out of foster care exactly 13 months ago on her 18th birthday. No family to call, no safety net, no graduation ceremony or celebration, just a social worker handing her a garbage bag of belongings and pointing toward the door. "Good luck out there," the woman had said, not even looking up from her paperwork. Since then, Zara had learned the brutal mathematics of survival. A meal at McDonald's cost $8. A night at the YMCA was $15 if they had space. Bus fare was $2.25 each way. Her part-time dishwashing job paid $12 an hour, but only gave her 15 hours a week. The numbers never added up. So here she was, outside another expensive restaurant, hoping someone's leftover compassion might buy her dinner. She'd discovered that asking for food worked better than asking for money. People seemed less suspicious, more willing to help when they could see exactly where their kindness was going. "Just make it through today," she whispered to herself, touching the wooden cross. It was something her last foster mother, Miss Johnson, used to say. "Just make it through today, baby girl. Tomorrow might be different." Miss Johnson had been good to her, taught her to say please and thank you, even when the world gave her nothing to be thankful for. Taught her that helping others was the fastest way to forget your own pain. That's why Zara still shared her food with Mrs. Rosa, the elderly homeless woman who slept near the train station. That's why she warned new kids on the street about which corners were dangerous after dark. That's why she still said, "God bless," to people who walked past without acknowledging her existence. The rain was picking up now, soaking through her jacket and chilling her to the bone. She pulled the fabric tighter around her shoulders and tried to make herself smaller against the brick wall. Through the restaurant's tall windows, she could see couples laughing over candle-lit dinners, families celebrating birthdays, business people closing deals over expensive wine. Zara used to dream about sitting at those tables, back when she thought she might actually make it to college, back when she believed the guidance counselor who said her grades were good enough for scholarships. "You could study anything," the woman had told her junior year. "Nursing, maybe? You have a real gift for helping people." Zara still carried that dream, buried deep beneath the daily struggle for survival. Sometimes, late at night in the shelter, she'd close her eyes and imagine herself in scrubs, helping sick children in a bright, clean hospital. Maybe even opening her own clinic someday, somewhere kids like her could get help without judgment. But dreams felt dangerous now. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. A well-dressed couple emerged from the restaurant, laughing as they waited for the valet to bring their car. The woman's diamond earrings caught the streetlight as she looked around, her gaze briefly landing on Zara before quickly looking away. Zara touched her wooden cross and tried to smile anyway. Miss Johnson always said that bitterness was poison you drank hoping someone else would get sick. "Tomorrow might be different," she whispered again, the words almost lost in the sound of rain hitting pavement. She had no way of knowing that tomorrow would be more different than she could possibly imagine. that the billionaire walking toward her in the darkness was about to recognize something that would change both their lives forever. But first, she had to survive tonight. The storm was getting worse, and she needed to find shelter soon. Her spot outside the restaurant wasn't giving her much protection, and hypothermia was a real danger on nights like this. She started to pack up her cardboard sign, preparing to make the long walk to the shelter. That's when she heard the commotion from across the street. Someone was in trouble. The night that would change everything started with Zara making a choice that most adults wouldn't have the courage to make. She was folding her soggy cardboard sign when the sound cut through the rain. A sharp cry, then the sickening thud of something heavy hitting concrete. Across the street, outside the upscale Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse, a well-dressed elderly man had slipped on the wet pavement. The fall was brutal. His head struck the concrete with a crack that made Zara's stomach turn. The man lay motionless, a dark pool already forming beneath his silver hair. For a moment, everyone froze. Valets in their crisp uniforms stood paralyzed. Restaurant patrons backed away from the scene, some pulling out phones to record rather than help. A few people called out generic offers of assistance, but no one moved closer. "Oh my God," someone said. "Is he breathing? Should we move him? Don't touch him! You could make it worse!" The elderly man, Robert, though Zara didn't know his name yet, remained unconscious. Blood was spreading across the sidewalk, mixing with the rainwater in pink rivulets that ran toward the storm drain. Zara stood on the opposite corner, every instinct screaming at her to stay away. She knew how this would go. A homeless black teenager approaching a wealthy white man covered in blood? Security would assume the worst. Police would ask questions she couldn't afford to answer, but she couldn't just watch someone die. The rain intensified, turning from drizzle to downpour. Thunder rumbled overhead, and the few people who had gathered began seeking shelter under awnings and umbrellas. The injured man was getting soaked, his condition growing more critical by the second. "Someone needs to help him," Zara said to no one in particular, but the words were lost in the storm. She touched her wooden cross, feeling the familiar grooves worn smooth by years of worry. Miss Johnson's voice echoed in her memory. "When someone needs help, you help. That's what good people do, baby girl. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." The valet staff were clearly in over their heads. One young man kept saying he'd called 911, but the ambulance would take time in this weather. Every second mattered with a head injury this severe. Zara had learned basic first aid in one of her foster homes. Mrs. Patterson, a retired nurse, had insisted all her kids know CPR and trauma response. "You never know when this knowledge might save a life," she'd said. Another clap of thunder shook the street. More people retreated indoors, leaving the injured man increasingly alone on the wet concrete. Zara made her decision. She stuffed her cardboard sign into her backpack and ran across the street, dodging puddles and ignoring the curious stares from bystanders. Her worn sneakers splashed through the intersection as car horns honked at the crazy girl running through traffic in a storm. "Excuse me," she called the valet staff as she approached. "Has anyone checked if he's breathing?" The young valet looked relieved to see someone taking charge, even if that someone was a homeless teenager. I don't know. We called 911, but that's good. But we need to help him now," Zara said, kneeling beside Robert despite the growing pool of blood and rainwater. Her knees immediately soaked through, the cold pavement biting through her thin jeans. She could see his chest rising and falling slightly, still breathing, but his pulse felt weak when she checked his wrist. The head wound was serious, a gash near his temple that wouldn't stop bleeding. "Sir," she said gently, leaning close to his ear. "Can you hear me? Help is coming." No response. Around her, the crowd of onlookers grew restless. Some people were taking photos. Others complained about the rain. A few seemed genuinely concerned, but clearly didn't know what to do. "Miss, you really shouldn't," a security guard started to say. "He's somebody's father." Zara cut him off, her voice firm despite her chattering teeth. "He's somebody's whole world. I'm not leaving him alone." She looked at Robert's pale face and made another decision that would define the rest of her life. Without hesitation, she began removing her jacket, her only protection against the cold Chicago night. Because sometimes saving someone else means sacrificing everything you have. What this homeless teenager did next would be captured on every security camera and change the course of 2 lives forever. Zara didn't hesitate. She peeled off her only jacket, the thin barrier between her and the freezing rain, and carefully lifted Robert's bleeding head to slide the fabric underneath. The jacket was old and worn, but it was all she had to offer. "Someone get towels from the restaurant!" she shouted to the frozen crowd. "And call 911 again! Tell them we have an unconscious man with severe head trauma!" The security guard stepped forward. "Miss, you really shouldn't be touching him. You could what? Save his life?" Zara's voice cut through the rain as she pressed her torn t-shirt against Robert's head wound. "Because that's what I'm trying to do." She was soaked within seconds. Her thin t-shirt offered no protection from the storm, and her jeans were already drenched from kneeling in the puddle of rainwater and blood. But she didn't move away from Robert's side. The contrast was striking. Around her stood dozens of well-dressed people in expensive coats and umbrellas, all keeping their distance. Yet here was this homeless girl, giving up her only warm clothing to help a stranger. "Sir, stay with me," she said softly, keeping her voice calm even as her own hands shook from cold and adrenaline. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay." Robert's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. His breathing was shallow, and Zara could feel his pulse weakening under her fingertips. She'd seen enough medical shows to know this wasn't good. "What's his name?" she called the valet staff. "Mr. Caldwell," one of them answered. "Robert Caldwell. He's a regular here. Come in every Tuesday for dinner." "Mr. Caldwell, my name is Zara," she said, leaning close to his ear. "I need you to stay with me, okay? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." Nothing. Around them, the storm intensified. Wind whipped through the street, sending debris flying and making the umbrellas people held nearly useless. Several onlookers gave up and retreated indoors, but a core group remained, watching this teenage girl refuse to abandon the injured man. "Don't just stand there, get towels!" Zara commanded again, her voice stronger now despite her chattering teeth. "And someone needs to direct the ambulance when it gets here." The crowd around them was growing larger, but no one else stepped forward to help directly. A few people held umbrellas over the scene, which Zara appreciated, but most just watched like it was street entertainment. "Where's that ambulance?" Someone complained about the safety of the restaurant awning. "Traffic's probably terrible in this weather," another voice added. "He's going to die if we just stand here," Zara said loudly, making several people uncomfortable with her bluntness. She turned out the murmurs and focused on Robert. She kept pressure on the head wound with one hand while using the other to shield his face from the driving rain. Her own body was shivering uncontrollably now, but she positioned herself to block as much of the storm as possible. "Come on, Mr. Caldwell," she whispered. "Don't give up on me. You've got people who love you. They need you to fight." Blood was seeping through the makeshift bandage faster than she'd like. Head wounds always bled heavily, she remembered Mrs. Patterson saying, but this seemed excessive. She pressed harder, knowing it might hurt him, but understanding that bleeding out was a bigger danger than discomfort. A restaurant manager finally appeared with a stack of clean towels and a blanket. "Here," he said, handing them to Zara. "Is there anything else you need?" "Just keep those umbrellas over him," she said, gratefully replacing her soaked t-shirt with the dry towels. "And maybe send someone to flag down the ambulance when it gets here. They might have trouble finding us in this storm." The manager nodded and barked orders to his staff. For the first time since the accident, people seemed organized and purposeful instead of just gawking. Zara wrapped the blanket around her own shoulders but kept most of it draped over Robert. She maintained pressure on the wound, counting seconds in her head. Mrs. Patterson had taught her that head injuries were unpredictable. You could seem fine one minute and slip into a coma the next, or lose too much blood and never wake up at all. "You're doing great," she told Robert, even though he couldn't hear her. "Your family is probably wondering where you are. They need you to come home tonight." Thunder crashed overhead, so loud it made several people jump and drop their umbrellas. The storm was getting worse, turning the downtown street into a river. Water rushed toward storm drains, carrying debris and making the sidewalks even more treacherous. "Miss," the security guard tried again, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Maybe you should step back and let the professionals—" "What professionals?" Zara snapped, not looking up from Robert. I don't see any paramedics here yet, do you? The guard fell silent. I'm not leaving him, Zara continued, her voice softer but no less determined. Not until someone better qualified takes over. A woman in an expensive fur coat pushed through the crowd. Somebody should do something, she announced loudly. This is terrible publicity for the restaurant. Zara looked up at her with disbelief. This isn't about publicity. This is about a human being who might die. The woman huffed and retreated, muttering about inappropriate responses. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes, she heard the distant wail of sirens. The ambulance was fighting through traffic, its red lights barely visible through the sheets of rain. Over here! The restaurant manager called, waving frantically at the approaching vehicle. 2 staff members ran into the street with flashlights to guide them. 2 paramedics jumped out, their equipment bags slung over their shoulders as they ran toward the scene. The crowd parted to let them through, some people slipping on the wet pavement in their haste to get out of the way. What happened? The lead paramedic asked, kneeling beside Zara without a second glance at her homeless appearance. Slip and fall on wet pavement, she reported quickly. The head struck concrete at approximately 9:47 p.m. He's been unconscious for about 15 minutes. Pulse is weak but steady. I've been maintaining pressure on what looks like a temporal laceration. No obvious neck or spinal trauma, but I haven't moved him. The paramedic looked surprised at her precise medical language and professional assessment. Are you a nurse? No, just someone who cares, Zara said, finally stepping back to give them room to work. Robert tried to repay her that night, but what Zara refused would later seem impossible to believe. The next day, Zara walked 2 hours across Chicago to reach Northwestern Memorial Hospital. She couldn't afford the $4.50 bus fare, and her sneakers were still damp from the night before, but she needed to know if Mr. Caldwell was okay. The hospital lobby felt like another world. Marble floors, soft lighting, and the quiet hum of expensive medical equipment. Zara was painfully aware of how she looked, still wearing the same blood-stained clothes, her hair uncombed, carrying everything she owned in a torn backpack. I'm here to see Robert Caldwell, she told the receptionist, trying to sound confident. The woman behind the desk looked her up and down with obvious suspicion. Are you family? No, I helped him last night, when he fell. The receptionist's expression softened slightly. Oh, you're the girl from the news. Room 347, elevators over there. Zara found Robert's room easily enough. Through the open door, she could see him sitting up in bed, a large bandage covering the left side of his head. His color looked much better than it had on the rainy sidewalk. She knocked gently on the doorframe. Mr. Caldwell? Robert turned and his face lit up immediately. My angel, please come in. Around his bed sat what was clearly his family, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, a woman with kind eyes, and 2 teenagers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Everyone, this is Zara, Robert announced proudly, the young woman who saved my life. The family members looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and surprise. Zara could tell they hadn't expected someone like her, young, black, obviously homeless. The doctor said you probably prevented brain damage, the middle-aged man said, extending his hand. I'm David, Robert's son. We can never thank you enough. Zara shook his hand quietly. I'm just glad he's okay. Robert reached for the nightstand beside his bed and pulled out a thick envelope. Zara, I want you to have this. It's not nearly enough for what you did, but please, take it. She could see the edge of cash inside, more money than she'd seen in months. Probably enough for an apartment deposit, new clothes, maybe even a chance to get back on her feet. Mr. Caldwell, I can't take that, she said gently. But you must! You saved my life! In that storm when everyone else was afraid to help. His voice broke slightly. You gave me your jacket, your shirt. You had nothing and you gave me everything. Zara touched the wooden cross at her throat, feeling its familiar weight. My foster mom used to say that you don't save lives for money. You do it because it's right. Robert's son, David, leaned forward. My father owned several real estate companies. Caldwell Properties. Maybe you've seen our signs around the city. We could find you a job, an apartment. That's very kind, Zara said. But I'll be okay. She wasn't okay, of course. She had maybe $12 to her name and nowhere to sleep tonight except the shelter if they had space. But taking money for helping someone felt wrong somehow. Robert studied her face carefully, something like recognition flickering in his eyes. "That cross you wear? It's beautiful. Has it been in your family long?" "It was my mama's," Zara said simply. "The only thing I have left of her." Robert nodded slowly, as if filing away that information for later. Then he reached into his bedside drawer and pulled out a business card and a $20 bill. "At least take this," he said, pressing both into her hand. "And if you ever need anything at all, you call that number." Zara looked at the card, Caldwell Properties in elegant gold lettering with Robert's name and phone number below. "And please," Robert added, reaching under his bed for an expensive black umbrella, "take this. The weather forecast says more storms this week." The umbrella was clearly costly, real wood handle, sturdy frame with Caldwell Properties embossed in small gold letters near the grip. Zara hesitated, then accepted it gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. This is very kind." As she left the hospital, she had no idea that Robert had immediately called his nephew, or that a private investigator would soon be asking questions about a brave teenage girl with a wooden cross necklace. Most importantly, she didn't know that Richard Caldwell had been watching the news coverage of her heroic act with growing recognition and disbelief. What Zara didn't know was that someone had been watching the news coverage, someone who recognized her face from long ago. The story spread faster than anyone expected. Homeless teen saves businessman became the lead story on 3 different news channels. The security footage was crystal clear. A young woman sacrificing her only jacket to help a stranger, refusing to leave his side despite the freezing rain. By Thursday morning, the video had been shared thousands of times. #Angel on the Street was trending locally. People started leaving food and donations at the corner where Zara usually sat, though she was too overwhelmed by attention to claim them. "I don't like all these cameras," she told Mrs. Rosa, the elderly homeless woman who had become her closest friend on the streets. "Makes me nervous." Zara used some donated money for a shower at the local gym and bought a clean t-shirt from Goodwill. The umbrella Robert had given her proved invaluable. It rained every day that week. What she didn't notice was the black Lincoln Continental parked across from the shelter for 3 consecutive days, or the well-dressed man inside, making phone calls and studying her movements. 40 blocks away, in a corner office on the 62nd floor of Willis Tower, Richard Caldwell sat frozen at his desk. The news was playing on his wall-mounted television for the 3rd time that morning. There she was. The same gentle eyes, the same kind expression. Older now, but unmistakably the same girl. Richard opened his office safe and pulled out a worn leather wallet. Inside, protected by plastic, was a faded photograph he'd carried for 11 years. A young black girl, maybe 8 years old, wearing a wooden cross necklace and smiling shyly. He held the photo up to the television screen, comparing faces. His hands were shaking. "It can't be," he whispered. "But those eyes." Richard reached for his phone and dialed a number on the speed dial. "Morrison Investigations," came the gruff voice. "Jack, it's Richard Caldwell. I need you to find everything about a girl named Zara Williams. She's been in the news this week." "The homeless kid who saved that businessman? That's her. I need her background, where she came from, everything." "Anything specific I should look for?" Richard stared at the photograph. "I need to know if she ever lived near Lincoln Park, about 11 years ago. And Jack? Yeah? I need this yesterday." Meanwhile, Zara had no idea that across town, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. She was focused on immediate concerns, like where she would sleep tonight. The man in the black Lincoln continued watching, waiting for the right moment to approach. But first, he needed to be absolutely certain. The photo Richard pulled from his safe would reveal a connection so profound, it would explain why he built his entire empire. It happened on Friday evening, just as Zara was leaving the shelter after volunteering in their kitchen. She'd spent the day helping serve meals to other homeless people, finding purpose in the small act of giving back, even when she had so little herself. The black Lincoln was waiting at the curb. Richard Caldwell stepped out, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the run-down neighborhood. Zara recognized the type, immediately wealthy businessman, probably lost, definitely out of place. "Excuse me," he said, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "Are you Zara Williams?" Zara's body tensed. She'd learned to be cautious around strangers, especially ones who knew her name. "Yes, sir. Am I in trouble?" "No, not at all." Richard's voice was gentle, almost reverent. I need to ask you something." His eyes locked onto the wooden cross at her throat, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, wonder, maybe even tears. "Where did you get that necklace?" The question was so unexpected that Zara instinctively touched the cross. "It was my mama's. Why?" Richard pulled out his wallet with trembling hands. From inside, he withdrew a photograph, old, creased, protected by plastic like something precious. "Is this you?" Zara stared at the image. It was definitely her, but much younger, maybe 8 years old, wearing the same wooden cross, standing next to a woman she barely remembered, her mother. "How do you have this picture?" she whispered. "Do you remember the Lincoln Park area, about 11 years ago before your mother died?" The memories came flooding back like a dam breaking. Mama works double shifts at the diner, walking home late from church on Tuesday nights, the scary neighborhood they had to cut through because the bus didn't run that late. "I remember some things," Zara said carefully. "But I was just a kid." Richard's face was pale now, his voice barely controlled. "Do you remember a man with a broken-down car? 3 other men bothering him?" And suddenly Zara did remember, the man by the old Buick looking terrified, the 3 bigger men surrounding him, voices angry and threatening, the knife one of them was holding gleaming under the streetlight. She remembered being 8 years old and scared, walking home with her mother from evening service at Mount Calvary Baptist. They were taking the shortcut through the bad part of town because Mama was exhausted and the long way would add another mile to their walk. "Mama, those men look angry," she had whispered. Her mother had tried to steer her away. "Mind your business, baby. We need to get home." But Zara had seen the fear in the lone man's eyes. It reminded her of how she felt when the bigger kids at school picked on her. "Stop right there," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "I need to tell you what happened next." "I remember," Zara said softly. "I got scared for you." Richard nodded, tears openly streaming down his face now. "Tell me what you did." "I kicked over the trash can," she said, the memory crystal clear now. "The big metal one by the bus stop. It made this huge noise, clang, and all the house lights started turning on. And then I yelled as loud as I could, 'Help! Someone help the man!' I wanted everyone to come outside and see what was happening." Richard was openly sobbing now. "The 3 men ran away. They didn't want witnesses. They dropped the knife and just ran," Zara continued, lost in the memory. "You were shaking so bad. I felt sorry for you. Your mother came running over, angry that you'd gotten involved. She was scared," Zara said defensively. "Mama didn't like trouble, but she saw you were hurt, and she couldn't just leave you there. She invited me to walk with you to the main street, said it was safer in numbers. And I gave you my church money," Zara finished. $3.50, everything I had in my little purse." Richard laughed through his tears. "You said it was for my car to work again." "I thought you were poor like us," Zara said. "Your car was so old and broken." "I was poor," Richard said. "Not in money, but in everything that mattered. I was 34 years old, successful on paper, but completely empty inside. I was taking stupid risks, making dangerous deals, hanging around with the wrong people." He gestured to the neighborhood around them. "I was down here at midnight buying information from criminals, information that could have destroyed my competitors. I was so consumed with winning, with getting ahead, that I'd lost track of who I was supposed to be." "What happened after we left you?" "I went home and looked at myself in the mirror, really looked, and I realized that an 8-year-old girl had more courage than I did. You saw someone in danger and acted without thinking about the cost to yourself." Richard wiped his eyes with an expensive handkerchief. "That night changed everything. I stopped making deals with criminals. I started building my business the right way. Every decision I made, I asked myself, would this make the brave little girl proud? You built Caldwell Properties because of that night. I built everything because of that night. But more than that, I've been looking for you ever since. I hired investigators, checked school records, searched everywhere. When your mother died and you went into foster care, you disappeared into the system." Zara stared at him in amazement. "You've been looking for me for 11 years?" "Every single day," Richard said. "Because I owed you a debt I could never repay. You saved my life, Zara, not just from those men, but from the person I was becoming." He took a deep breath. "And now I need to ask you something that's going to sound impossible." What Richard offered next was so unthinkable that Zara thought she was hallucinating from hunger. "Zara," Richard said, his voice steady despite the tears still in his eyes, "I want to adopt you as my daughter." The words hit her like a physical blow. She actually took a step backward, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "I want you to be my daughter, legally, officially, completely." Richard's hands were shaking as he spoke. "I want to give you the life you should have had all along." Zara looked around the empty street, half expecting cameras to appear. This had to be some kind of joke. Rich men didn't just adopt homeless teenagers off the street. "Sir, I think you have me confused with someone else," she said carefully. "I'm nobody special. I'm just—" "You're the most special person I've ever met," Richard interrupted. "You gave me $3.50 when you had nothing. You risked your life to save a stranger when you were just 8 years old. And this week, you did it again." He pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. "My Uncle Robert, the man you saved outside the restaurant, he's family. When I saw the news coverage, I knew it had to be you." Zara stared at the phone screen, trying to process this information. "Mr. Robert is your uncle? He told me everything. How you gave up your only jacket. How you stayed with him in the rain while everyone else backed away. Just like you did for me 11 years ago. Richard put his phone away and looked directly into her eyes. "I never married Zara. Never had children. I threw myself into building my business, but I always felt like something was missing. Now I know what it was." "You want to adopt me," she repeated slowly, still not believing it. "I want to give you everything you deserve. A home, a family, an education, a future." Richard's voice grew stronger, more confident. "I want you to have the Caldwell name. I want to walk you down the aisle at your college graduation. I want to be the father you never had." Zara touched her wooden cross, her mind spinning. "I don't understand. People don't just... This doesn't happen in real life." "It's happening right now," Richard said gently, "if you'll let it." He gestured toward his car. "I have lawyers standing by. We can start the paperwork tonight. You'd move into my penthouse apartment immediately, your own room, your own bathroom, whatever you need." "I can't afford—" "You don't pay for anything ever again," Richard said firmly. "That's what fathers do for their daughters. They provide." Zara felt dizzy. The conversation was moving too fast, offering too much. "What would you want in return?" "Nothing," Richard said immediately. "Absolutely nothing except the chance to be your family. But I'm 19. I'm not a little kid anymore. Age doesn't matter. You'll always be my daughter, no matter how old you are." Richard smiled. "Though legally the adoption process is easier because you're an adult. You can choose this for yourself." He pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "I had my legal team prepare these documents today, just in case. Full adoption papers. You'd be Zara Caldwell, with all the rights and privileges that come with that name." Zara stared at the papers, too overwhelmed to read them. "Why now? Why me?" "Because 11 years ago you taught me what real courage looks like. This week you reminded me. And because—" Richard's voice broke slightly. "Because I've been searching for my daughter my whole life, and I finally found her." "What about education?" "I never finished high school." "Private tutors starting immediately. Then college wherever you want to go. Harvard, Yale, Northwestern. Any career you choose, I'll support you completely." "I wanted to be a nurse," Zara whispered. "Or maybe a doctor, help kids like me." "Then that's exactly what you'll be." Richard beamed. "In fact, I want to do more than just support your education. I want to create something together." He pulled out another document. "The Zara Williams Foundation. $500 million to start. Focused on helping kids age out of foster care. You'd be the co-director, working alongside me to make sure no child ever goes through what you went through." Zara's legs felt weak. She sat down heavily on the curb, staring at the papers in disbelief. $500 million? That's just the beginning. Every year we'll add more. We'll build housing programs, education initiatives, job training centers. We'll change the entire system. And you want me to help run it? I want you to lead it, Richard corrected. You understand what these kids need because you've lived it. You have the heart and the wisdom to make real change. Zara looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Caldwell, I don't know how to be somebody's daughter. I don't know how to live in a nice place or go to fancy schools. I've been on the streets for over a year. Richard knelt down beside her on the dirty sidewalk, not caring about his expensive suit. And I don't know how to be somebody's father. But we'll figure it out together. That's what families do. He held out a pen. What do you say, Zara? Will you let me be your dad? Zara took the pen with trembling hands. Through her tears, she could barely see the signature line, but she could feel her mother's wooden cross against her chest, warm and comforting. Mama always said family would find me when I needed it most, she whispered. Is that a yes? Zara looked up at Richard's hopeful face and smiled through her tears. Yes, Daddy, that's a yes. Zara's transformation was miraculous, but what she did with her new power would change thousands of lives. The first month was overwhelming. Zara had never lived anywhere with more than one bathroom, and suddenly she had an entire floor of Richard's penthouse to herself. The marble counters, heated floors, and panoramic views of Lake Michigan felt like something from a movie. It's okay to be overwhelmed, Richard told her one evening as they shared dinner on china plates that cost more than she used to spend on food in a month. I felt the same way when I first started making real money. We'll take it one day at a time. The private tutors arrived within a week. Math, science, literature, history, all the education she'd missed while surviving on the streets. Zara threw herself into learning with fierce determination, studying 12 hours a day to catch up on lost time. By month 6, she was testing at college level in every subject. The years of reading discarded books and newspapers on the street had actually kept her sharp, her tutors said. She just needed structure and guidance. You're brilliant, her literature teacher, Dr. Morgan, told her. Have you considered which university you'd like to attend? Zara looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. I want to stay local, Northwestern maybe. I want to help the community that raised me. She graduated high school equivalency in record time and enrolled at Northwestern University, majoring in social work with a minor in business administration. Richard drove her to campus on the first day, both of them crying as he hugged her goodbye. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. Your mother would be too. College brought new challenges. Some students whispered about the charity case who'd been adopted by a billionaire. But Zara's professors quickly learned to respect her insights into poverty, homelessness, and systemic inequality. Most of you are studying these issues theoretically, she told her social policy class during a heated discussion about welfare reform. I lived with them. Let me tell you what actually works. Her senior thesis on foster care reform caught national attention. News outlets interviewed the billionaire's daughter who was using her platform to advocate for forgotten children. Every child deserves what I got, she told CNN. Not necessarily wealth, but safety, education, and someone who believes in them. Meanwhile, the Zara Williams Foundation was becoming a national model. Starting with Chicago, they opened residential facilities for kids aging out of foster care, not just temporary housing, but true support systems with counselors, job training, and educational assistance. The first facility housed 50 young people. Within 2 years, they had expanded to 12 cities. The waiting lists were heartbreaking, but the success stories were inspiring. Marcus, aged out at 18 with nowhere to go, became a certified electrician through their job training program. Keisha, pregnant and homeless at 19, earned her nursing degree with foundation support and now ran health clinics in underserved communities. The statistics are incredible, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the foundation's research director, told the board during their 3rd annual meeting. 93% of our program participants achieve stable housing within 6 months. 87% complete job training or degree programs. We're not just changing individual lives, we're breaking generational cycles of poverty. Zara, now 23 and graduating summa cum laude from Northwestern, had become the foundation's most effective spokesperson. She testified before Congress, appeared on national television, and never forgot where she came from. "I know what it feels like to sleep in doorways," she told a Senate subcommittee on child welfare. "I know what it's like to age out with nothing but a garbage bag of belongings, but I also know what's possible when someone believes in you." The foundation's influence extended beyond direct services. Their advocacy led to policy changes in 15 states, extending support services for foster children until age 25 instead of cutting them off at 18. Major corporations began partnering with them, offering internships and job placement programs. Universities created scholarship pipelines. The model was being replicated internationally. "You've created something extraordinary," Richard told Zara at her college graduation, where he proudly walked her across the stage. "But more than that, you've become the woman I always knew you could be." The graduation ceremony was covered by major news networks. The story of the homeless teenager who became a billionaire's daughter and used her platform to change the world had captured national imagination. But for Zara, the real measure of success wasn't media coverage or policy victories. It was the letters she received from young people across the country who now had hope because someone had shown them that transformation was possible. "Dear Zara," one letter began, "I'm 18 and aging out next month. I saw your story on TV. If it happens for you, maybe it can happen for me too." Those letters reminded her why this work mattered, every single day. 7 years later, Zara would face a moment that brought everything full circle and proved that courage multiplies when shared. The rain was falling again, just like that night when everything changed. Zara, now 26 and director of the Zara Williams Foundation, was leaving their newest facility after a long day of donor meetings. Walking toward her car, she noticed a familiar scene across the street. A teenage boy, maybe 16, sat hunched against a brick wall. His cardboard sign was barely legible. "Please help, hungry." Zara's heart clenched. The boy looked exactly like she had, desperate, defeated, but still holding on to hope. She crossed the street and sat beside him on the wet pavement, not caring about her expensive suit. "Rough day?" she asked gently. The boy looked up, suspicious. "You a cop? Social worker?" "Neither. I'm someone who understands." She showed him a photo on her phone, herself at 19, sitting in the same spot with an identical cardboard sign. "That's you?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. 7 years ago. My name's Zara. What's yours?" "Marcus." "But this ain't gonna be some fairy tale for me." Zara smiled sadly. "Maybe not a fairy tale, but maybe something real." She told him her story, the streets, saving Robert, finding Richard, the adoption that changed everything. Marcus listened with growing amazement. "So, you're rich now?" "I'm family now," she corrected, "and that's worth more than money." From her purse, she pulled out the same umbrella Robert had given her years ago, worn but still sturdy. "Would you like a warm meal and a safe place tonight?" Marcus hesitated. "What's the catch?" "No catch, just a chance to show your courage in a new way." She helped him up and led him toward her car. "Marcus, I want you to meet your new family." 20 minutes later, they arrived at the newest foundation facility. Inside, dozens of young people who had aged out of foster care were studying, laughing, building lives together. "This is home," Zara told Marcus as she introduced him to staff, "for as long as you need it." From his office window, Richard watched his daughter guide another lost child toward hope. He texted her, "Your mother would be proud of the courage you're spreading." Zara responded, "Both my mothers would." That night, as Marcus settled into his first safe bed in months, Zara sat in her childhood bedroom at Richard's penthouse. She held her mother's wooden cross and smiled. Some families are born, others are chosen. The best ones are built on courage and kindness, creating ripples that touch lives for generations. The courage keeps multiplying, one brave heart at a time. Your courage could be someone's family, you just never know who needs a father, mother, or sibling today. Zara's story shows us that family isn't about blood. It's about the courage to love unconditionally. Richard didn't just save a homeless girl, he found his brave daughter. In a world full of abandoned children, be someone's reason to believe in the power of chosen family. This week, show courage for someone who has none, mentor a child in your community, defend someone who can't defend themselves, support a single parent struggling to make ends meet. If you're able, consider fostering or adopting a child who needs a family. Your bravery could transform someone's entire world, just like Zara's courage transformed Richard's life 11 years ago. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Like this video to spread Zara's message of brave love. Subscribe for more stories that prove courage and kindness always win. What act of courage will you show today? Tell us in the comments below.